a werewolf shifter romance audiobook written by Mr. V. Chapter 1. The scent of burning sage was the first thing Kira remembered. Not the pain, though her wrists screamed where the iron bit into flesh. Not the darkness, though it pressed against her eyes like a living thing. It was the acrid, ceremonial smoke that filled her lungs with each shallow breath. A scent that meant ritual, meant intention, meant someone had planned this carefully. She hung suspended in the void, her arms stretched overhead and chained to something cold and unyielding. Her toes brushed against rough stone, but couldn't find purchase. Every muscle in her shoulders burned with the effort of supporting her weight. The air was thick and damp, carrying the mineral smell of deep earth and something else, something old and patient. Where am I? The question ricocheted through her skull like a scream she couldn't voice. One moment she'd been gathering moon petals in the sacred grove of the Ashwood Pack, her basket half full of the luminescent flowers that only bloomed under the full moon. The next, a wall of shadow, a hand over her mouth, and the world tilting sideways into nothing. Now this suffocating darkness, this silence broken only by the rasp of her own breathing. The iron wasn't just restraining her, it was wrong. Delta wolves like her had a natural resistance to most metals, could feel the pull of the earth through steel and copper. But this burned with a cold that had nothing to do with temperature. It made her feel hollow, scraped clean. She reached for her wolf, for the steady presence that had been with her since her first shift at 13, and found only an echo, a ghost of what should be there. Panic clawed up her throat. She swallowed it back, tasting bile and blood. She'd bitten her tongue at some point. Focus. Think. Her pack, the Ashwood, was small, peaceful. They lived in the old-growth forests of the Northern Territories, far from the power struggles of the great packs. They had no enemies, no wealth, no strategic value. Delta wolves were rare, yes, but not rare enough to kidnap. They were mediators, the emotional anchors of pack structure, valuable to their own people, but not to outsiders. So why her? Why this? Time became meaningless. It could have been hours or days. No light changed in the absolute black. No sound came from beyond her prison. Her throat was sand-dry, her stomach a hollow ache. They'd given her nothing, no water, no food. Was this her fate? To simply fade away in the dark, forgotten? Then she heard it. A door, distant but definite, groaning open. The sound of metal scraping stone. Footsteps. Not the quick, nervous steps of a guard or captor checking on a prisoner. These were slow, deliberate. The footsteps of someone who owned every inch of ground they crossed. Kira's heart became a war drum. She pressed back against the wall, trying to make herself smaller, invisible. The footsteps grew louder, accompanied now by the flicker of torch light that made the darkness retreat in shuddering waves. The light grew, spilling through what must be bars she couldn't see. It painted the walls of her cell in shades of amber and shadow, rough-hewn stone, ancient and stained. And then the footsteps stopped. Just beyond the bars, a figure stood in silence. He was massive, even motionless. His presence filled the space like a physical weight. He wore dark armor, not the ceremonial kind, but battle-worn leather and blackened steel that spoke of countless fights survived. His face was partially obscured by the torch light behind him, but she could see the sharp angle of his jaw, the brutal line of his shoulders. And his eyes. They caught the light and threw it back in shades of amber and bronze. Wolf eyes, burning with an intelligence that was wholly human and something far more primal. They swept over her with an intensity that made her skin prickle, assessing her from head to toe with the thoroughness of a predator sizing up prey. She couldn't look away. Terror locked her muscles, froze her breath. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, radiating a dominance so absolute that her wolf, even muted and distant behind the iron, whimpered its recognition. This was an alpha. Not just any alpha, but something more. Something apex. The air grew thick, charged with an energy that made the fine hairs on her arms stand on end. She could smell him now. Wood smoke and mountain air, the sharp tang of ozone before a lightning strike, and beneath it all, something wild and untamed that made every instinct scream, both run and submit. He took a step closer to the bars. The torchlight finally caught his full face. He was younger than she'd expected. Perhaps 30, though it was hard to tell with the harsh planes of his features. A scar cut through his right eyebrow, pale against sun-darkened skin. His hair was dark, shot through with silver at the temples despite his age. But it was his eyes that held her captive, burning bronze, ancient and knowing, fixed on her with an intensity that felt like being dissected. Kira found her voice, though it came out as a rasp. "What do you want?" His head tilted slightly, like a wolf catching an unexpected scent. When he spoke, his voice was a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the stone itself. "You." The single word landed like a physical blow. I don't understand." Her chains rattled as she trembled. "My pack has nothing. We're no threat to anyone. Please, there's been a mistake." "No mistake." He moved closer still, until only the bars separated them. His hand came up, fingers wrapping around the iron as if it were nothing. "I have been searching for you for 2 full moons. Every night, the pull grew stronger. Every night, the emptiness became unbearable." His eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, something raw and desperate flickered in their depths. "And then 3 nights ago, the connection became a beacon. It led me to a forgotten grove in Ashwood territory. Led me to you, gathering flowers by moonlight, singing to yourself." Kira's blood turned to ice. "You were watching me. I was finding what belongs to me. I don't belong to anyone." A low sound rumbled from his chest, not quite a growl, but close. "Your wolf knows better. I can sense her even now, behind the iron's suppression. She recognizes me. You're insane." "Perhaps." His grip tightened on the bars. 2 moons of madness. 2 moons of an emptiness in my chest that nothing could fill. My advisors thought I was weakening. My enemies began to circle. And all because you existed somewhere in the world, and I could feel you like a missing limb." He released the bars and stepped back, and she could finally breathe again. He paced slowly in front of her cell, a caged predator himself. "Do you know what the old legends say about bonded pairs?" he asked, his voice softer now but no less intense. "They say that the moon goddess herself weaves certain souls together, that she creates matches so perfect, so complete, that to be separated is to live half a life." No. "Those are stories," Kira whispered. "Myths told to pups. I believe that too." He stopped pacing, turned to face her fully. "Until I felt you. Until the madness had a name, a face, a scent that haunts my every waking moment." He moved back to the bars, close enough that she could see the tension in every line of his body, the barely restrained hunger in his eyes. "You are my fated match, Kira of the Ashwood. Deny it all you want. Fight it with every fiber of your being. It changes nothing." The words hung in the stale air between them. Fated match. The rarest bond, the stuff of legends and romance tales. The idea that 2 souls were crafted to complement each other perfectly. 2 halves of one whole. It was supposed to be beautiful, magical. This felt like a nightmare. "No," she breathed, shaking her head frantically. The movement made her chains rattle. "No, that's not. You can't just decide." "I didn't decide anything." His voice cracked with frustration. "Do you think I wanted this? Do you think I have time for a reluctant delta from a backwater pack?" His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I have a territory to govern, enemies to face, alliances to maintain. The last thing I needed was to be brought to my knees by a bond one can't control." "Then let me go." "I can't." The admission seemed to pain him. "The wolf in me has found its mate. To release you would be to tear out half my soul. And yours. Mine feels fine." But even as she said it, she felt the lie. Something had been different these past weeks. A restlessness she couldn't name, a sense of searching for something she couldn't identify. Dreams of bronze eyes and mountain air. No, she wouldn't accept this. "My pack," she said, grasping for any leverage. "They'll look for me. When I don't return, your pack believes you dead." He delivered the words with brutal efficiency. "A rock slide in the canyon near where you were gathering flowers. Your basket was found at the edge. No body recovered, but no one survives a fall into those rapids." The world tilted. You staged my death?" "I gave them a story they could believe. Closure. Your family grieves, but they will heal. Better that than knowing you were taken." Tears burned hot trails down her cheeks. Her mother, her father, her little brother Finn, only 10 years old. They thought she was dead. They were mourning her. "You're a monster," she choked out. Something flickered across his face, pain perhaps, or regret, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by that same iron control. He reached for the lock on the cell door. The metallic click echoed through the chamber. The door swung open with a groan. Kira's eyes widened. Was he letting her go? But no, he was stepping inside, ducking slightly to clear the low doorframe. His size seemed to double in the confined space. He crossed to her in 3 strides. "What are you doing?" Her voice pitched high with panic. He didn't answer, his gaze fixed on the iron chains that bound her. His jaw clenched, and she saw the muscle jump in his cheek. Then, before she could process what was happening, his hands closed around the chain at her right wrist. The scream that tore from his throat was animal, pure, agonized sound. Smoke rose from where his skin met the iron. The acrid smell of burning flesh filled the air. But he didn't let go. The muscles in his arms corded, his entire body straining, and with a sound like breaking bone, the chain snapped. Her right arm dropped, suddenly free and numb from being held overhead so long. Before she could even gasp, he'd moved to her left wrist. Again, that terrible scream. Again, the smell of burning. Again, the chain breaking under impossible strength. She crumpled forward, her legs unable to support her. He caught her before she hit the ground, his arms banding around her despite the burns that must be agony on his palms. The contact hit her like lightning. Without the iron as a barrier, without the suppression of her wolf, the bond roared to life. It was a tidal wave of sensation, his pain sharp and bright, layered over a loneliness so deep it was like drowning, and underneath it all, a fierce, possessive need that terrified and compelled in equal measure. And her own wolf, suddenly awake and aware, surged toward him with recognition that bypassed all logic. Mate. Home. Safe. Ours. No, Kira whimpered against his chest, even as her body instinctively curled into his warmth. Please no. He shifted her in his arms, cradling her as if she weighed nothing. His burned hands must be screaming, but his grip never faltered. When he spoke, his voice was rough, scraped raw. The chains are broken, Kira. But the real test begins now. He carried her out of the cell, out of the darkness, and toward whatever fate awaited in the light. Chapter 2. The solid warmth of his chest against her cheek was disorienting. Everything about this was wrong. The ease with which he carried her, the way her traitorous body relaxed into his hold, the thread of connection that now hummed between them like a plucked string that wouldn't stop vibrating. Kira kept her eyes squeezed shut, trying to block it all out. But she couldn't escape the sensations flooding through the bond. His relief at having her in his arms. The ever-present loneliness that sat in his chest like a stone. The sharp, burning pain in his palms that he was actively ignoring. He'd burned himself. Deliberately. She didn't want to feel grateful. She didn't want to feel anything but hatred for the man who'd stolen her life. But the bond made everything complicated, layering his emotions over hers until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. The air changed as they moved. The dank chill of the dungeon gave way to something cleaner. Stone that had seen sunlight, air that moved freely. She heard footsteps echoing off high ceilings, the rustle of fabric, hushed voices that fell silent as they passed. "My lord," a female voice said, tight with disapproval. "Not now, Helena." His voice rumbled through his chest into Kira's ear. "The healers need to see to your hands." "I said not now." The finality in his tone ended the conversation. More footsteps, faster now. Kira risked cracking her eyes open just a sliver. They were in a massive corridor. Stone walls rose at least 20 feet, carved with intricate patterns of wolves and moons and forests. Torches burned in iron sconces, casting dancing shadows across elaborate tapestries depicting great battles. Between them hung weapons, swords, axes, spears, all clearly functional, not decorative. This was a warrior's keep, a place of power and violence. Her captor shouldered through an enormous wooden door carved with phases of the moon. The space beyond stole what little breath she had left. It was a tower room, circular and vast, with windows, actual windows, that stretched from waist height to the vaulted ceiling. Late afternoon sunlight poured through them, painting everything in shades of amber and gold. The view beyond was breathtaking. Mountains stretching to the horizon, their peaks still capped with snow despite the summer warmth, valleys thick with forests spreading between them like a dark green sea. The room itself was beautiful. A massive bed dominated one side, its frame carved from dark wood and piled with furs and blankets in deep earth tones. A fireplace large enough to stand and occupied another wall, already laid with wood. Bookshelves lined the curved walls between windows, filled with leather-bound volumes. Plush rugs covered the stone floor, and a sitting area near the windows held comfortable chairs and a low table. It looked like a sanctuary. It smelled like a trap. He carried her to the bed, and laid her down with surprising gentleness. The softness after hours of hanging from chains was almost painful. Her muscles screamed as they finally relaxed, cramping and releasing in waves. She forced herself to look at him as he straightened. In the full light, he was somehow more intimidating. Tall enough that he'd have to duck through most doorways, shoulders broad enough to block the sun. His armor was scarred and dented, speaking of countless battles. But it was his face that held her, sharp cheekbones, strong jaw, that pale scar bisecting his eyebrow, and eyes that burned with an intensity that made her feel like she was being seen down to her very soul. His hands, she noticed, were a ruin. The palms were blistered and raw where he'd gripped the iron chains, the flesh angry red and weeping. He held them carefully at his sides, but she could feel the pain radiating through the bond. A steady, throbbing ache he was determinately ignoring. "You need a healer," she heard herself say. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps. "I've survived worse. That doesn't mean you should suffer needlessly. Concerned for your captor, little Delta?" There was no mockery in his tone, only curiosity. "I'm concerned that infection might kill you before I figure out how to escape." A sharp bark of laughter escaped him, genuine and unexpected. It transformed his face for a moment, softening the harsh lines. "There it is. The fire I sensed in you." He moved toward the door. "These are your chambers. You'll have everything you need, food, clothing, books. But you will not leave. Do not test me on this. So I've traded one cage for another." "A gilded one," he acknowledged. "But yes." He paused at the threshold, his hand on the door frame. "My name is Theron. Theron Stormcrest, Alpha of the Iron Peak Pack and Lord of the Northern Reaches." His bronze eyes found hers again. "And whether you accept it or not, you are my fated mate. That makes you the future lady of these mountains. The sooner you understand that, the easier your life will be." "Never," Kira whispered. His jaw tightened. "We shall see." The door closed behind him with a heavy thud. A moment later, she heard the distinctive sound of a bolt sliding home. Locked in. Kira lay motionless for a long moment, staring at the vaulted ceiling. Then slowly she pushed herself upright. Her arms shook with the effort, muscles protesting after so long in restraint. She forced herself to stand, swaying, and made her way to the nearest window. The bars were there, of course. Elegant scrollwork of black iron, but bars nonetheless. She gripped them, testing their strength. They didn't budge. Beyond them, the drop was dizzying. The tower fell away to rocky cliffs hundreds of feet below. No escape that way. She turned, surveying her prison. Beautiful, comfortable, inescapable. A soft knock at the door made her spin around. "Enter," she said, then felt foolish. As if she had any authority here. The door opened to admit two women. The first was older, perhaps 50, with iron-gray hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes like chips of flint. She wore a simple but well-made dress in dark gray, and her posture spoke of military discipline. The second was younger, maybe 18, with mousy brown hair and nervous hazel eyes. She carried a tray laden with food, bread, cheese, sliced fruit, and a steaming bowl of stew. "Miss," the older woman said crisply, "I am Helena, head of the household staff. This is Mara, who will be attending to your needs." Her tone suggested she found the entire situation distasteful, but would fulfill her duties regardless. The younger girl, Mara, bobbed a clumsy curtsy and nearly dropped the tray. Her hands trembled as she set it on the table by the sitting area. "Attending to my needs," Kira repeated flatly. "You mean watching me?" Helena's expression didn't change. "Lord Theron has instructed us to see to your comfort and your education regarding your position here." "My position as a prisoner, you mean?" "Your position as the Alpha's mate." Helena's voice was iron. "Whether you accept it willingly or not, the bond exists. Lord Theron has claimed you. That makes you Lady of Iron Peak, and you will be treated as such." "I don't want." "What you want," Helena interrupted, "is irrelevant. You will eat. You will bathe. You will dress appropriately. And you will learn what is expected of the lady of these mountains." She gestured toward a door Kira hadn't noticed. "The bathing chamber is through there. Mara will assist you. Lord Theron will return this evening." The promise, or threat, hung in the air. Helena turned and strode from the room, her back military straight. Mara remained, fidgeting with the edge of her apron. "Miss," the girl said softly, "the bath is already drawn. The water's still hot." Kira wanted to refuse, wanted to rail against this gilded cage and everyone who served her captor. But she was filthy from the dungeon, her mouth tasted of blood and fear, and her body ached in ways she'd never experienced. She nodded stiffly and followed Mara into the bathing chamber. It was as luxurious as the bedroom. A large stone tub, sunken into the floor, already filled with steaming water that smelled of lavender and something sharper, pine maybe. Towels were stacked on a bench. Soap and oils waited on a small table. Mara helped her out of her torn, filthy dress with gentle hands that shook slightly. The girl was terrified, Kira realized. Of her. Of Theron. Of what might happen. Sinking into the hot water was bliss so intense it brought tears to Kira's eyes. She hadn't realized how cold she'd been, how deeply the dungeon's chill had seeped into her bones. The heat unknotted muscles, soothed abraded wrists, and for just a moment, she let herself forget where she was and why. But only for a moment. How long has he been searching for me? Kira asked as Mara began gently washing her hair. The girl's hands hesitated. Miss, I don't think. Please. I need to understand. Mara's voice dropped to barely a whisper. 2 full moons, miss. Maybe more. He became different. Restless. Angry at nothing and everything. He stopped eating properly. Barely slept. The advisors were worried. Some said he was going mad. And now you're here. Mara's hands resumed their work. And I've never seen him like he was when he carried you in. Like he'd finally found something he'd lost. The words settled over Kira like a weight. He'd been suffering. The bond had been affecting him too, driving him to madness before he even knew she existed. It didn't excuse kidnapping her. It didn't make this right. But it complicated things. When she emerged from the bath, wrapped in the softest towel she'd ever touched, clean clothes waited. Not her simple homespun from Ashwood, but a dress of deep forest green wool, beautifully made and perfectly fitted. The realization that Theron had somehow known her size sent an uncomfortable shiver down her spine. She dressed, letting Mara help with the laces. The girl then combed out her hair, working through the tangles with patient care. There, miss, Mara said softly. You look lovely. Kira caught her reflection in a polished bronze mirror. The woman looking back seemed like a stranger, clean, dressed in fine clothes, hair falling in damp waves around her shoulders. She looked like she belonged in this tower. She hated it. The food, miss, Mara prompted gently. You should eat. The stew smelled incredible. Kira's stomach clenched with hunger so sharp it was painful. She hadn't eaten in. How long? Days. She forced herself to eat slowly, methodically, though she wanted to devour everything on the tray like a starving animal. The bread was fresh and warm. The stew was rich with meat and vegetables. The fruit was sweet and perfectly ripe. It was the best food she'd had in her life, and it tasted like betrayal in her mouth. Helena returned as she was finishing, eyeing her with that same disapproving assessment. Better, the older woman said grudgingly. Now we discuss your responsibilities. I have no responsibilities here except finding a way home. Your home is here now. Helena's tone brooked no argument. Lord Theron is alpha of the most powerful pack in the northern reaches. He holds dominion over 7 lesser packs and commands an army of over 2,000 wolves. His territory stretches from the Frostbite Mountains to the Whispering Forest, and his word is law. Kira's stomach sank. This wasn't some minor pack lord. Theron was a king in all but name. As his mate, Helena continued, you will be expected to stand beside him, to represent the pack, to be a symbol of stability and power. You will attend councils. You will meet with the leaders of allied packs. You will. I will do none of those things, Kira interrupted, because I'm not his mate. I'm his prisoner. Helena's eyes narrowed. The bond says otherwise. The bond is a curse. The bond is a gift from the moon goddess herself, Helena snapped, her composure cracking for the first time. Do you know how rare fated matches are? 1 in 1,000 wolves, if that. Most spend their entire lives without ever feeling that pull. And you throw it back in the alpha's face like it's nothing. He stole me from my family. He saved you from a life of mediocrity. Helena's voice rose. Your pack is nothing. 40 wolves, maybe 50, hiding in the forests with no power, no influence, no future. Here, you could be a queen. You could have power beyond anything you've ever imagined. And all you can do is complain about the cage. The words hit like physical blows. Kira's hands clenched into fists in her lap. Get out. Miss. Get. Out. Helena's jaw tightened, but she nodded stiffly. As you wish. But Lord Theron will return tonight. And he will not be as patient as I have been. She turned and swept from the room, Mara scurrying after her. The bolt slid home again. Alone, Kira stood and returned to the window, staring out at the mountains that were now her prison walls. The sun was setting, painting the peaks in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere beyond those mountains was Ashwood territory. Her family, her home. They thought she was dead. The grief hit her like a wave. Her mother, strong and gentle, who sang while she worked. Her father, quiet and wise, who'd taught her to track deer through the forest. Finn, her baby brother, who followed her everywhere and made her laugh with his terrible jokes. They were mourning her, and she couldn't even tell them she was alive. A howl rose from somewhere in the fortress below. It was answered by another, then another, until a chorus of wolves sang to the rising moon. The sound was beautiful and terrifying, a reminder of the wild power that lived within every shifter, the beast that was never quite tamed. She felt her own wolf stir, wanting to answer, wanting to run, wanting to find her mate and... No, not her mate, her captor. The bond pulsed in her chest, a steady thrumming awareness that told her exactly where Theron was in the fortress. Moving closer, coming back to her. Her heart began to race. The bolt slid back. The door opened. Theron filled the doorway, backlit by torchlight from the corridor. He'd changed out of his armor into simpler clothes, dark trousers and a loose shirt that somehow made him seem even larger. His hands were bandaged, white cloth stark against his tanned skin. His bronze eyes found her immediately, and the bond flared hot and bright between them. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low and rough. "About what happens next." He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. The sound of the bolt was the loudest thing Kira had ever heard. Chapter 3. Theron stood just inside the door, his presence filling the circular room like smoke fills a bottle. The setting sun streaming through the windows painted him in shades of amber and shadow, highlighting the sharp planes of his face, the tension in his shoulders, the way his bandaged hands hung carefully at his sides. Kira forced herself to remain by the window, gripping the iron bars for support. The bond hummed between them, that invisible thread pulling taut with his proximity. She could feel his exhaustion, the dull throb of pain from his burns, and underneath it all, a bone-deep relief at being near her again. She hated that she could feel it, hated that part of her, the traitorous, instinct-driven part, wanted to go to him, to soothe that ache. "I won't run," she said, breaking the heavy silence. "Not tonight. I'm too tired, and we both know I wouldn't make it past the guards." Something flickered across his face. "I didn't come here to discuss your escape attempts." "Then why are you here?" He moved further into the room, but stopped at the sitting area, maintaining distance between them. He sank into one of the chairs with a weariness that seemed to go beyond the physical. For the first time, she noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the lines of strain around his mouth. "Because you deserve answers," he said quietly. "Real ones, not the fragments I gave you in the dungeon." Kira didn't move from the window. "So give them." Theron was silent for a long moment, staring at his bandaged hands. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost distant. "Do you know what it's like to lead 2,000 wolves? To have every decision scrutinized, every weakness exploited? To know that a single moment of doubt could spark a challenge that would leave bodies in its wake? Is this supposed to make me feel sorry for you?" "No." His eyes lifted to hers. "It's supposed to make you understand why I can't afford to be weak. Why I can't afford to show vulnerability." He gestured vaguely at the room, at the fortress beyond. "For 8 years, since my father died and left me this crown, I've been alone. Surrounded by wolves, by advisors and warriors and courtiers, and utterly, completely alone." Despite herself, Kira felt the echo of his loneliness through the bond. It was vast and cold, an emptiness that nothing could fill. 2 moons ago, Theron continued, something changed. I started feeling hollow, like there was a hole in my chest that grew bigger every day. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Food tasted like ash. My advisors thought I was ill. My enemies began circling, sensing weakness. His jaw clenched. I thought I was going mad. "The bond," Kira whispered. "The bond," he confirmed. Though I didn't know it then. I just knew something vital was missing, and the need to find it was driving me to the edge of sanity. His bronze eyes held hers. And then, 3 nights ago, the emptiness became a beacon. A pull so strong I couldn't ignore it. I gathered a small group and followed it into Ashwood territory. Kira's breath caught. "You invaded our lands. I crossed the border with 4 wolves. Hardly an invasion. His tone was dry. We tracked the pull to a sacred grove. And there you were, gathering moon petals by starlight, singing an old ballad I hadn't heard since childhood. His voice softened. The moment your scent reached me, the world stopped. The madness had a name, a face, a purpose. So you took me. So I took you, he agreed without shame. Because the alternative was leaving you there and feeling that void tear me apart from the inside. That's not love, Kira said, her voice sharp. That's obsession. Perhaps. Theron leaned back in the chair, studying her. But tell me, Kira, what have you been feeling these past weeks? Any restlessness? Trouble sleeping? Dreams you couldn't quite remember but left you feeling incomplete? She wanted to deny it, but the word stuck in her throat because yes, all of it. The inexplicable urge to wander the forest at night, the dreams of bronze eyes and mountain air, the feeling that she was searching for something without knowing what. Her silence was answer enough. The bond affects both partners, Theron said, though it manifests differently. For alphas, it's aggressive, a need to find and claim and protect. For deltas, he tilted his head. What do deltas feel? A pull, Kira admitted reluctantly. Like homesickness for a place you've never been. And now that we're together, what do you feel now? She wanted to lie, to tell him she felt nothing but hatred and disgust. But the bond made lying pointless. He could feel the truth through the connection just as clearly as she could feel his emotions. Confusion, she said finally. Anger. Fear. She paused. And underneath it all, a wrongness when you're not near. Like something's out of place. Theron nodded slowly. The bond seeks completion. It wants us together. Wants the connection sealed and permanent. Fighting it is like fighting the tide, exhausting and ultimately futile. So I should just surrender? Accept being kidnapped and held prisoner because some cosmic force decided we belong together. I'm not asking you to surrender. Theron stood, moving closer but still maintaining distance. I'm asking you to understand what we're dealing with. This isn't just attraction or infatuation. It's a soul-deep connection that won't simply disappear because you will it to. My family. I know. Pain flickered across his face. I know what I took from you. The grief you feel for them echoes through the bond. I feel it like it's my own. He moved to the window, standing beside her, but not touching. I staged your death because the alternative was war. If I'd simply taken you, your pack would have demanded your return. My pack would have refused. Blood would have been spilled, and in the end, the logic was cold and brutal and infuriatingly sound. You could have asked, Kira said, her voice breaking. You could have approached the pack properly, requested a meeting, courted me like a civilized wolf instead of a monster. And if you'd refused? If your alpha had refused? Theron's voice was gentle but unyielding. The bond doesn't accept refusal, Kira. It would have driven us both mad until we gave in. At least this way, only 2 lives are disrupted instead of 200. My life isn't disrupted, Kira said bitterly. It's destroyed. Theron flinched. Through the bond, she felt the impact of her words like a physical blow. Good. She wanted him to hurt. But then she felt something else, his determination, solid as stone. He wasn't going to let her go. Not now, not ever. The bond had found its match, and he would burn the world before he lost her. What do you want from me? Kira asked, exhaustion creeping into her voice. What's the endgame here? The truth. Theron turned to face her fully. I want you to accept the bond. To stand beside me as my mate and Lady of Iron Peak. To build a life here with me. And if I never accept it? His jaw tightened. Then we'll both live half-lives, fighting a connection that only grows stronger with time. The bond doesn't fade, Kira. It deepens. Every day we resist it, the pull becomes more intense, more demanding. He held up his bandaged hands. I burned myself on iron to free you from those chains. Do you think that was rational? Controlled. The bond makes us do irrational things. So I'm trapped, Kira said flatly. Whether I accept it or not, I'm trapped. We're both trapped. Theron's voice was quiet. I can no more release you than I can stop breathing. The bond has decided, and we can either fight it until we destroy ourselves, or we can try to make the best of what we've been given. The best of being a prisoner in a tower? The best of being the second most powerful wolf in the northern reaches, Theron corrected. The best of having influence, resources, purpose. The best of, he stopped, then continued more quietly. The best of not being alone anymore. The vulnerability in those last words struck something deep in Kira's chest. Through the bond, she felt the truth of it. 8 years of crushing loneliness, of bearing impossible weight with no one to share it, of being surrounded by wolves who served him but never truly knew him. She understood loneliness. She'd felt it too in different ways. The otherness of being a delta in a world that valued strength and dominance. The sense of being apart even while surrounded by pack. "I can't just forget my family," Kira whispered. "I can't just stop grieving them. I would never ask you to." Theron moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "Grieve them. Miss them. Hate me for taking you from them. But don't destroy yourself fighting something neither of us can change." His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her cheek with a gentleness that seemed impossible from someone so large, so dangerous. The touch sent sparks racing under her skin, the bond flaring bright and hot. "I feel you," he murmured, his voice rough. "Every emotion, every thought. Your fear, your anger, your grief, it all echoes through me. And underneath it," his thumb traced her cheekbone. "Underneath it all, I feel the bond calling to you the same way it calls to me. I feel your wolf recognizing mine." Kira's breath hitched. She wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. Her wolf was pacing inside her, drawn to his in ways that bypassed all logic. The beast recognized its mate, and it wanted to answer his call with every fiber of its being. "This isn't fair," she whispered. "No," Theron agreed. "It's not." He leaned in closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. The bond between them was a living thing now, pulsing with energy that made the air shimmer. She could feel his heartbeat as if it were her own. A steady, powerful rhythm that her heart was trying to match. "I won't force this," he said softly. "I won't force the final claiming, the permanent seal. That has to be your choice. But I can't leave." "No, you can't leave." His honesty was brutal. "But within these walls, you have freedom. Learn about the pack. Explore the fortress. Meet the wolves who serve here. Understand what it means to be Lady of Iron Peak." His hand slid from her cheek to rest over her heart. "And feel the bond. Stop fighting it for just one day and see what it's really offering. And if I still want to leave after that." Theron's expression darkened. "Then we'll face that battle when it comes. But Kira, the bond grows stronger every day. Every hour we spend together, every touch we share, every emotion that passes between us, it deepens the connection. Eventually, leaving won't be something you want anymore. It will be something you can't even imagine." "That sounds like a threat." "It's a warning." He stepped back, putting distance between them again. The loss of his proximity was immediate and jarring, like stepping from sunlight into shadow. "The bond is inevitable. The only question is whether we fight it until it breaks us, or whether we accept it and find peace. There's no peace in captivity. Then help me transform it into something else." Theron moved toward the door. "Tomorrow, I'll show you the fortress. Introduce you to key members of the pack. Let you see what this life could be." He paused at the threshold. "And tonight, I'll leave you in peace to think. Will you lock the door again?" He met her eyes. "Yes, because we both know you'd try to run if I didn't, and I can't risk losing you." His voice softened. "But the lock isn't just to keep you in, Kira. It's to keep others out. There are wolves in this fortress who see you as a weakness to exploit. Until you're formally accepted as lady, until the bond is sealed and permanent, you're vulnerable. Vulnerable to what? To challenge. To those who would use you against me. To..." He stopped, jaw clenching. "Let's just say not everyone is pleased that their alpha has found his mate. Some see it as a liability." The word sent a chill down Kira's spine. She'd been so focused on Theron as her captor that she hadn't considered the broader political implications. She was a delta from a minor pack, suddenly thrust into the highest position in one of the most powerful territories in the north. Of course there would be opposition. "I'll keep you safe," Theron said, reading her fear. "No one will touch you while I draw breath. But the safest place for you right now is here, in these chambers, until the pack understands that you're mine and under my protection." "How long?" "As long as it takes." He studied her for a long moment. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will be demanding." He left before she could respond. The bolt slid home with that same heavy finality. Kira stood alone in the center of the room as full darkness fell outside the windows. She could still feel Theron through the bond, moving through the fortress, his presence a steady anchor in her awareness. She knew when he stopped in what must be his own chambers. Knew when he sat down heavily, exhaustion finally catching up with him. Knew when he removed the bandages from his hands and inspected the burns, felt the sharp spike of pain he tried to suppress. She pressed her palm over her heart, trying to block out the sensations. But it was useless. The bond had awakened, and there was no putting it back to sleep. Moving mechanically, she prepared for bed. Mara had left a nightgown, soft cotton that felt like sin against her skin. She climbed into the massive bed, sinking into furs and blankets that smelled faintly of mountain air and pine. Of him. She tried to sleep, but every time she closed her eyes, she saw bronze eyes and felt phantom touches on her skin. The bond hummed steadily, a connection she couldn't sever no matter how much she wanted to. And the worst part, the truly terrifying part, was that some traitorous piece of her didn't want to sever it. Some deep, instinctive part of her felt complete for the first time in her life, like a puzzle piece finally finding its place. Outside, wolves howled to the moon. Inside, Kira pressed her face into the pillow and tried not to feel the answering call in her own chest. The bond was inevitable, Theron had said. Lying alone in the darkness, feeling his presence through that unbreakable connection, Kira feared he might be right. Chapter 4. Morning came with pale sunlight streaming through the tower windows and the sound of the bolt sliding back. Kira jerked awake, disoriented, her heart pounding. For a confused moment she thought she was home in Ashwood, in her small room with its single window overlooking the forest. Then reality crashed back. The tower, the bond, Theron. Mara entered carrying a breakfast tray, her eyes downcast. "Good morning, miss. Lord Theron requests that you dress and meet him in the main hall within the hour." Kira sat up, pushing tangled hair from her face. Through the bond, she could feel Theron already awake and active, his presence a steady pulse somewhere below in the fortress. The connection was stronger this morning, more insistent, as if the bond had deepened while she slept. "What's in the main hall?" she asked. "The morning council, miss. Lord Theron wants to introduce you to the pack leadership." Mara set the tray down, fresh bread, honey, cheese, and sliced apples. "He thought it best that you see how the pack operates. Or best that the pack see me," Kira thought. This was about establishing her position, making it clear that she was under his protection. A political move dressed up as courtesy. After Mara helped her into a dress of deep crimson, another perfectly fitted garment that made her skin crawl with the wrongness of it, Kira stood before the bronze mirror. The woman looking back seemed even less familiar than yesterday. The rich color brought out the gold in her hazel eyes, and with her dark hair braided in an intricate crown, she looked almost regal. She looked like someone who belonged at an alpha's side. The thought made her stomach twist. 2 guards waited outside her door. Massive beta wolves in leather armor, their expressions carefully neutral. They fell into step on either side of her as Mara led the way through the fortress. Escort or prison guard? Both probably. The corridors were busier this morning. Wolves moved through the halls with purpose. Servants carrying supplies, warriors in training gear, officials with scrolls and ledgers. Every single one stopped and stared as she passed. She felt their assessment, their curiosity, their judgment. Some looked intrigued. Others looked hostile. The bond flared as they descended a grand staircase, and she knew without looking that Theron was close. Her traitorous heart began to race. The main hall was enormous, a cathedral of stone and timber with vaulted ceilings held up by massive carved pillars. Windows high in the walls let in shafts of morning light that illuminated a space filled with wolves. Dozens of them, maybe 100, gathered in clusters around a central raised platform where Theron stood. He wore formal armor today, black leather and steel engraved with the phases of the moon, a heavy cloak of wolf fur across his shoulders. On his head sat a crown of twisted iron and moonstone that caught the light. He looked every inch the warlord, the king, the apex predator who ruled these mountains. His bronze eyes found her the moment she entered. The bond surged between them, so strong it nearly staggered her. She felt his relief at seeing her, his satisfaction at how she looked in the crimson dress, and underneath it all, a fierce possessive pride that made her cheeks burn. The hall fell silent as every wolf turned to look at her. Theron descended from the platform in 3 strides. He crossed to her with that same predatory grace, his presence parting the crowd like a blade through water. When he reached her, his hand came up to cup her face, a gesture of possession and reassurance that everyone could see. "You came," he said quietly, for her ears only. Did I have a choice? No, but I appreciate the illusion of cooperation. There was dark humor in his voice. He turned, keeping one hand on the small of her back, and addressed the assembled wolves. My brothers and sisters of Iron Peak, I present Kira of Ashwood, my fated mate, your future lady. The silence was deafening. Kira could feel the weight of 100 gazes, the shock and calculation, and barely concealed hostility. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, a voice called out, "Adelta, you bind yourself to Adelta." Theron's hand tightened on her back, but his voice remained level. The moon goddess makes no mistakes in her bondings. Kira is my mate. That makes her second only to me in this pack. The moon goddess, another voice said, older female, sharp with disdain. Or your own weakness. We all saw what the search did to you, my lord. How it consumed you. Perhaps this bond is not a blessing, but a curse designed to bring you low. Kira felt Theron's anger spike through the bond, but his expression remained neutral. Elder Moira, your concern is noted. But the bond is real, and it is sealed by forces beyond our comprehension or control. Sealed, the elderly woman stepped forward, her silver hair pulled back from a face carved by decades of survival. Her eyes, pale gray and sharp as winter ice, swept over Kira with open contempt. The bond is acknowledged, perhaps, but sealed, that requires the claiming mark. I see no such mark on her throat. The crowd murmured. Kira's hand instinctively went to her neck, to the unmarked skin where a mate's bite would permanently brand her as Theron's. The claiming will come in time, Theron said, his voice carrying a warning edge. When Kira is ready. And in the meantime? A new voice, this one male and younger. The crowd parted as a wolf strode forward. He was nearly as tall as Theron, with the same powerful build, but his features were sharper, his eyes a stormy gray rather than bronze. His dark hair was pulled back in a warrior's knot, and he wore armor that matched Theron's. In the meantime, we're supposed to accept this stranger as our lady? Bow to a Delta who brings no alliance, no strength, no value to this pack. Theron went very still. Through the bond, Kira felt his emotions shift from controlled anger to something far more dangerous. A cold, deadly calm. Kieran, Theron said, and the name was both greeting and warning. I wondered when you'd make your appearance. Kieran. The way Theron said it, the tension that radiated through the bond. This was someone important. Someone dangerous. Brother, Kieran replied, and Kira's blood turned to ice. Brother, did you think I wouldn't have opinions about your choice of mate? Your opinions are irrelevant. Theron's voice was flat. The bond chose. Neither of us had a say in it. The bond, Kieran scoffed. He circled them slowly, a wolf assessing prey. Convenient, isn't it? Just when the pressure from the council to take a political mate was becoming unbearable. Just when 3 different alphas were offering their daughters to secure alliances. You suddenly feel a mystical bond to a nobody from nowhere. Careful, Theron growled. But Kieran wasn't finished. His gray eyes fixed on Kira, and she saw nothing but cold calculation there. Tell me, little Delta, what did you do to ensnare our alpha? What tricks did your minor pack teach you? Because this, he gestured at Theron at the bond between them, this is too convenient to be genuine. I didn't do anything, Kira said, finding her voice despite the fear coiling in her stomach. I didn't ask for this bond any more than he did. No, Kieran moved closer, invading her space. So you expect us to believe that Theron, who has spent 8 years refusing every political match, every strategic alliance, suddenly abandons all reason for a Delta he'd never met? That he risks war with neighboring packs, alienates his advisors, and makes himself look weak, all for genuine love? The word dripped with mockery. It's not love, Kira said quietly. It's a bond. There's a difference. Finally, something truthful from her lips. Kieran turned back to Theron. You see? She doesn't even pretend to care for you. This is a disaster, brother. A liability we can't afford. What I can't afford, Theron said, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble, is your insubordination. Stand down, Kieran. Or what? Kieran's hands clenched into fists at his sides. You'll challenge me? Your own brother? The wolf who stood beside you through every battle, every threat to your rule. His voice rose, carrying to every corner of the hall. Father would be ashamed. He built this pack on strength, on strategic alliances, on power. And you would throw it all away for a mystical bond with a weak little Delta who will give you weak little pups and make you weak in the eyes of every pack in the north. The bond exploded with Theron's rage. It hit Kira like a physical blow, pure, incandescent fury that made her gasp. In the space between heartbeats, Theron moved. He was on Kieran before anyone could blink, his hand wrapped around his brother's throat, slamming him back against one of the stone pillars. The impact shook dust from the rafters. Kieran's eyes widened, not with fear, but with something that looked almost like satisfaction. "You want to question my judgment?" Theron snarled, his voice barely human. "You want to call my mate weak? To insult the bond the moon goddess herself created?" His grip tightened. "I have tolerated your ambition, Kieran. I have overlooked your constant positioning, your whispers to the council, your attempts to undermine me at every turn. But you will not touch her. You will not threaten her. And you will show her the respect her position demands." Kieran's face was turning red, but he managed to force out words. "Or what, brother? Or I will end you." Theron's voice was cold as winter death. "Bond or no bond, I am still Alpha. Challenge me if you dare, but know that I will paint these floors with your blood before I let you harm what is mine." The hall was silent. Every wolf stood frozen, watching the two brothers locked in confrontation. Kira could feel the tension crackling in the air, could sense how close this was to exploding into violence that would leave bodies scattered across the stone. "My lord." An older male wolf stepped forward, gray-haired but still powerful, his armor bearing marks of high rank. "Please. This helps nothing." Theron's eyes never left Kieran's. "Tell that to my brother, Commander." "Lord Kieran." The commander's voice was firm. "Stand down. This is not the time or place." For a long moment, Kieran didn't respond. Then, slowly, deliberately, he tapped Theron's arm twice, a signal of submission, of yielding. Theron released him, shoving him back. Kieran stumbled, caught himself, his hand going to his throat where red marks were already blooming. "You're making a mistake," Kieran said, his voice rough. But his eyes held a cold promise of retribution. "This bond will destroy you. And when it does, when she proves to be the weakness I know she is, I'll be there to pick up the pieces of what you've broken." He turned and strode from the hall, a cluster of wolves following in his wake. The division in the pack was suddenly, painfully obvious. Those who followed Theron, and those who stood with his brother. Theron stood rigid, his breathing controlled but heavy. Through the bond, Kira felt the storm of his emotions, rage, frustration, and underneath it all, fear. Not for himself, but for her. Because Kieran had just made himself her enemy. The commander cleared his throat. "My lord, perhaps we should postpone the formal introductions until—" "No." Theron's voice was iron. "We proceed as planned. Everyone in this fortress will understand that Kira is under my protection. That she is to be treated as Lady of Iron Peak from this moment forward." His bronze eyes swept the assembled wolves. "Anyone who has a problem with that can follow Kieran. I will not tolerate division in my pack." Slowly, reluctantly, the wolves began to kneel. First the commander, then the guards, then more and more until the entire hall was filled with kneeling figures. All except the cluster of wolves who had followed Kieran out. Elder Moira was among the last to kneel, her face pinched with disapproval. But she knelt. Theron's hand found Kira's, his grip almost painful in its intensity. "Rise," he commanded, "and remember what you've seen here today. Kira is mine. She is your lady. And anyone who threatens her threatens me." The wolves rose in waves, their faces a mixture of respect, fear, resentment, and calculation. Kira felt the weight of their gazes, felt the target that had just been painted on her back. Kieran had made his challenge clear. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Theron turned to her, his expression softening slightly as he read the fear in her eyes. Through the bond, she felt his guilt, his regret at exposing her to this. "Come," he said quietly. "We're done here." He led her from the hall, his hand never leaving hers. The guards fell in around them, a protective formation that suddenly seemed necessary rather than just symbolic. They made it halfway back to her tower before Theron stopped in an empty corridor. He turned to her, his hands coming up to cup her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words were raw. "I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. Your brother hates me." Kira's voice shook. "He thinks I'm going to destroy you. My brother has wanted my position since the day I took it." Theron's jaw clenched. "He sees everything as a threat to his ambitions, including you. Especially you, because the bond gives me something he can't control or manipulate. He's dangerous. He is." Theron didn't try to deny it. "But he won't touch you. I'll make sure of that." "How?" Kira asked. How can you protect me from your own brother? Theron's eyes burned with an intensity that stole her breath. By making it impossible for him to see you as vulnerable. By completing the bond. By placing my claiming mark on your throat, so that every wolf in this fortress knows beyond doubt that you are mine and under my absolute protection. The claiming. The permanent seal. I'm not ready, Kira whispered. I know. Theron's forehead rested against hers. But Kira, after what happened in that hall, after Kieran's challenge, time is a luxury we may not have. An unclaimed mate is a target, a weakness to exploit. Once you bear my mark, you become untouchable. It's pack law. And if I refuse? Pain flickered through the bond. Then I will defend you with every breath in my body. But it will be harder, more dangerous. And Kieran will keep pushing until something breaks. Kira closed her eyes, feeling trapped between impossible choices. Accept the claiming and seal her fate forever, or remain vulnerable to wolves who saw her as nothing but a tool to use against their alpha. I need time, she said. Time is what we don't have. But Theron stepped back, releasing her. I'll give you until the full moon. 3 days. Think on it. Understand what's at stake. And then decide. Do you fight this bond until it destroys us both, or do you accept it and let me protect you the way a mate should? He turned and walked away, leaving her standing in the corridor with guards on either side and the weight of an impossible decision crushing her chest. 3 days until the full moon. 3 days until everything changed. Chapter 5. Kira spent the rest of that day locked in her tower, pacing like the caged animal she was. The guards had escorted her back immediately after Theron's ultimatum, and she hadn't seen him since. But she felt him, constantly, through that cursed bond, moving through the fortress, dealing with the fallout from the morning's confrontation. His anger was a steady simmer beneath the surface. His determination was absolute. And underneath it all, that bone-deep loneliness that called to something fundamental in her own soul. She pressed her hands against the cold window glass, staring out at the mountains. 3 days. 3 days to decide whether to accept a claiming that would bind her to Theron forever, or to remain vulnerable to wolves like Kieran who saw her as nothing but a weakness to exploit. Some choice. Mara brought lunch, then dinner, both times accompanied by Helena's stern presence. The older woman's disapproval was a palpable thing, though whether she disapproved of Kira herself or the situation was unclear. You're making this harder than it needs to be, Helena said as Kira picked at her evening meal. The sun was setting, painting the tower in shades of orange and gold. Am I supposed to make it easy? Kira set down her fork. I'm being asked to permanently bind myself to a man who kidnapped me. You're being asked to accept a gift the moon goddess herself provided. Helena's voice was sharp. Do you have any idea how many wolves spend their entire lives searching for what you've been given? How many would kill for a fated bond? Then they can have mine. It doesn't work that way, and you know it. Helena moved to the window, her expression softening slightly. I had a fated mate once. 50 years ago, when I was young and foolish and thought I knew better than the goddess herself. Kira looked up, surprised. Helena had never spoken of anything personal before. He was from a rival pack, Helena continued, her voice distant. Our families had been feuding for generations. When the bond snapped into place, I thought it was a curse. I fought it. I denied it. I told him to leave and never come back. She paused. He died 2 years later in a border skirmish. And I've spent the last 48 years living with a void in my chest that nothing can fill. Knowing that I threw away the one thing in this world that was made specifically for me. The words hung in the air, heavy with old grief. I'm sorry, Kira said quietly. Don't be sorry. Be smart. Helena turned to face her. Lord Theron is not a perfect man. He's ruthless when he needs to be. And he made a choice in taking you that many would call monstrous. But he's also the strongest alpha these mountains have seen in a century. He's fair, he's just, and he protects his own with everything he has. Her gray eyes pinned Kira. And more importantly, he's yours. The goddess herself wove your souls together. Fighting that is fighting the fundamental nature of the universe. What if I don't believe in the goddess? Belief is irrelevant. The bond exists whether you believe in it or not. Helena moved toward the door. 3 days, girl. 3 days to decide whether you'll embrace your fate or spend the rest of your life running from it. Choose wisely. She left, taking Mara with her. The bolt slid home. Alone again, Kira returned to the window. The moon was rising, not yet full, but close. 2 more days and it would be complete, round and silver, and calling to every wolf within 1,000 miles. Through the bond, she felt Theron in his chambers. Felt his exhaustion, the weight of the day pressing down on him. Felt him remove his crown and set it aside with the kind of weariness that went beyond physical. Before she could think better of it, she reached for him through the bond. Not with words, just reaching, offering a whisper of comfort, of understanding, the way she would for any packmate in distress. The response was immediate. His emotions surged toward her, surprise, then gratitude, then something warmer that made her breath catch. She felt him settle, felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly, felt him reach back, his presence wrapping around her like a warm cloak. They stayed like that for a long moment, connected across the distance. Not speaking, not even really thinking, just present with each other. Kira pulled back first, breaking the connection. Her heart was pounding. That had felt too intimate, too right, like something they'd done 1,000 times before. She forced herself to eat, then prepared for bed. Sleep was a long time coming, and when it finally arrived, it brought dreams. She was running through a forest she'd never seen. Tall pines heavy with snow, the ground frozen beneath her paws. She was in wolf form, powerful and free, her breath clouding in the cold air. And beside her ran another wolf, massive, with dark fur shot through with silver, bronze eyes gleaming in the moonlight. Theron. They ran together in perfect synchronization, two parts of a whole. She felt his joy, his freedom, the pure rightness of running beside his mate under the full moon. And her own wolf sang with answering joy, with completion, with home. They stopped in a clearing, circling each other playfully. His wolf was enormous compared to hers, easily twice her size, but he moved with careful gentleness, never using his full strength. They played, they ran, and finally they shifted back to human form. He stood before her naked and magnificent in the moonlight, his eyes full of something that made her chest ache. "This is what we could have," he said, his voice carrying across the dreamscape. "This is what the bond offers. Not a cage, Kira. Freedom. Completion. Home." She woke with tears on her cheeks. The second day passed in a blur. Kira tried to read from the books in her chamber, but the words swam before her eyes. She tried to eat, but everything tasted like ash. The bond hummed constantly, a reminder of the choice looming over her. Theron didn't come to see her. She felt him dealing with pack business, with challenges to his authority, with the political fallout from Kieran's confrontation. She felt his frustration, his anger, and underneath it all, his constant awareness of her. As the sun set on the second day, she finally allowed herself to really examine what she was feeling. Not what she thought she should feel, not what anger and resentment told her to feel, but what was actually true. The truth was, she wasn't as miserable as she'd expected to be. Yes, she grieved her family. Yes, she hated that she'd been taken without choice. But the tower wasn't a dungeon. The fortress, from what little she'd seen, was actually beautiful. And Theron was nothing like the monster she'd tried to paint him as. He was a male bearing impossible weight, a leader trying to hold together a fractured pack, a wolf who'd been driven to the edge of madness by a bond he hadn't asked for any more than she had. And through the bond, she'd felt his true nature, the fierce protectiveness, the lonely honor, the desperate need for connection that he'd buried under layers of duty and control. He wasn't holding her prisoner because he was cruel. He was holding her prisoner because letting her go would kill them both. The realization settled over her like a heavy blanket. She could keep fighting this, keep raging against the injustice of it all. But what would that accomplish? She'd still be here. The bond would still exist. And both of them would be miserable. Or she could choose to stop fighting, to accept what the goddess had given her, even if the delivery method was all wrong. To see where this path led instead of constantly trying to run from it. The thought terrified her. But staying in this limbo terrified her more. On the third day, the day of the full moon, Theron finally came to her tower. It was late afternoon, the sun painting everything in shades of amber and rose. He knocked before entering. The courtesy was so unexpected after days of simply having the door unlocked for servants that it made her heart clench. He looked exhausted. The shadows under his eyes were deeper, his jaw tight with tension. He wore simple clothes today. No armor, no crown, just dark trousers and a loose shirt. Trying to seem less intimidating, perhaps. "Kira," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Theron." They stood on opposite sides of the room. the space between them charged with tension and unspoken words. Through the bond, she felt everything he was feeling: hope, fear, determination, desperation. He'd come for her answer, and he was terrified of what it might be. "I've made my decision," Kira said. His entire body went rigid. "Tell me." She took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I need you to understand something first. I don't forgive you for taking me. I don't forgive the way this happened. And I will always grieve the family I lost." Pain flickered through the bond, but he nodded. "I understand. But," she forced herself to meet his eyes, "I also understand that fighting this bond is destroying us both. I've felt your loneliness through the connection, Theron. I've felt the weight you carry, the isolation of your position. And I've felt," she paused, swallowing hard, "I've felt what it would be like to stand beside you instead of against you. In the dreams, in the moments when I stop fighting and just feel." "What do you feel?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Completion," she admitted. "Like I found something I didn't know I was missing. Like all the restlessness, all the searching I've done my whole life, it was leading to this. To you." Hope blazed through the bond, so bright it almost hurt. "I can't promise I'll be a perfect mate," Kira continued. "I can't promise I won't still be angry sometimes, or that I won't grieve, or that this will be easy. But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to accept the bond and see where it leads." "The claiming," Theron said, taking a step toward her. "You're saying?" "I'm saying yes." The words came out stronger than she expected. "Tonight, under the full moon, I'll accept your claiming mark." The distance between them evaporated. Theron crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, his embrace fierce and desperate and gentle all at once. His face buried in her hair, and she felt him tremble. "Thank you," he breathed against her temple. "Thank you for giving us a chance. I swear to you, Kira, I will spend every day of the rest of my life making this right, making you happy, giving you a life worth living." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. "I have conditions." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Name them." "I want to send a message to my family. Let them know I'm alive. I don't care if they can never see me again, but I need them to know I'm not dead and that I'm safe." "Done," Theron said without hesitation. "I'll arrange it immediately." "What else?" "I want freedom within the fortress. No more being locked in this tower. If I'm going to be Lady of Iron Peak, then I need to understand the pack, meet the wolves, learn how things work." "Agreed. With guards for your safety, but yes, you'll have access to the entire fortress." His hands cupped her face. "Anything else?" "Respect," Kira said quietly. "I won't be treated like property or a prize. I'm not just an extension of you. I'm my own person, and I want my voice to matter." Something fierce and proud blazed in his bronze eyes. "Your voice will matter. I need a partner, Kira, not a decoration. The decisions I make affect thousands of wolves. Having your perspective, your insight," he shook his head. "You have no idea how much I've needed that. Then we have an agreement." She took a shaky breath. "Tonight, under the full moon, we complete the bond." "Tonight," Theron agreed. His thumb stroked her cheekbone in that way that sent sparks racing under her skin. "I'll make it good for you. I promise. The claiming is intense, but it doesn't have to be frightening." "I'm terrified," Kira admitted. "So am I." His honesty surprised her. "I've never done this before either. Never thought I would. And the idea of finally having you, of completing what we started the moment the bond snapped into place." His voice roughened. "I'm terrified I'll lose control, that I'll hurt you, that I won't be able to give you the gentleness you deserve." She reached up, her hand covering his where it rested against her cheek. "We'll figure it out together." The bond between them flared hot and bright, pulsing with anticipation and promise. Tonight. Everything would change tonight. Theron leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "Until tonight, then. I'll send Helena to help you prepare. The ceremony is tradition, formal, witnessed by the pack leadership. But after?" His eyes darkened with heat. "After is just us." He kissed her forehead, a chaste, gentle press of lips that somehow felt more intimate than anything they'd shared so far. And then he was gone, leaving her alone with racing heart and the knowledge that by morning, she would be irrevocably, permanently his. Outside the window, the sun continued its descent toward the horizon. The full moon would rise in just a few hours, and Kira of Ashwood would become Kira of Iron Peak, fated mate to the Alpha, Lady of the Northern Reaches. Forever. Chapter 6. The hours before moonrise passed in a strange blur of anticipation and ritual. Helena arrived with Mara and two other female attendants Kira had never met, all carrying garments and oils and an air of solemn purpose. The claiming ceremony is sacred, Helena explained as they helped Kira into a bath scented with night-blooming flowers and something sharper, cedarwood, maybe, or sage. It's witnessed by the pack's inner circle to legitimize the bond, to show that the Alpha's mate is claimed willingly and according to tradition. Willingly, Kira repeated, the word tasting strange on her tongue. Was this willing? She'd agreed, yes. But the circumstances. What's done is done, Helena said, reading her expression. The question now is whether you'll embrace your future or spend it drowning in regret. They dressed her in white, a gown of silk so fine it seemed to float, off-shoulder to expose her neck and collarbone. The claiming sight. Her hair was left loose, cascading down her back in dark waves. No jewelry, no adornment. The simplicity was deliberate, Helena explained. Nothing to distract from the mark that would soon brand her throat. Through the bond, Kira felt Theron preparing as well. His nervous energy matched hers, a feedback loop of anticipation that made her skin feel too tight. When the moon began to rise, huge and silver and perfect, the guards came to escort her down. The ceremony would take place in the Great Hall, the same space where Kieran had challenged her existence just days before. But it had been transformed. Torches burned in every sconce, their lights supplemented by hundreds of candles. The pack's inner circle stood in formation. Perhaps 40 wolves, all in formal dress, all watching with expressions ranging from curiosity to approval to barely concealed hostility. Elder Moira stood at the front, her face carved from stone. The commander was there, his weathered features neutral. And along the edges, Kira spotted some of the wolves who'd followed Kieran from the hall. They were here as witnesses, yes, but also as observers, watching for any sign of weakness. Kieran himself was notably absent. At the center of it all, on the raised platform, stood Theron. He wore formal ceremonial leathers, black and silver, intricately tooled with wolves and moons. His crown sat on his brow, the moonstone centerpiece catching the candlelight. But it was his eyes that captured her, bronze and burning with an intensity that made every other person in the hall disappear. The bond surged between them, nearly driving her to her knees with its force. She felt his hunger, his need, his fierce possessive love that had been building for months before they'd ever met. And underneath it, his determination to make this right, to give her a claiming she could look back on without shame. The guards led her to the platform. Theron descended to meet her, offering his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm, calloused, trembling slightly. "You're beautiful," he murmured, for her ears only. Like moonlight given form. Heat flooded her cheeks. She'd never been beautiful. She'd always been the practical one, the mediator, the wolf who faded into the background. But the way he looked at her, the reverence in his gaze through the bond, he believed it absolutely. Elder Moira stepped forward, her voice carrying through the hall. "We gather under the full moon to witness the claiming of Kira of Ashwood by Theron Stormcrest, Alpha of Iron Peak. The bond has been acknowledged. The match has been confirmed. What remains is the sealing, the permanent joining of two souls into one." She turned to Kira. "Do you come to this claiming of your own will, knowing its permanent nature, accepting its bonds and its blessings?" Every eye in the hall fixed on her. This was the moment. Her last chance to refuse, to back out, to choose a different path. Through the bond, she felt Theron's tension. He was holding his breath, terrified she'd say no despite everything. "I do," Kira said, her voice steady. Relief crashed through the bond so hard it made her sway. Theron's hand tightened on hers, keeping her upright. Moira turned to Theron. "Do you claim this wolf as your fated mate, to protect and provide for, to honor and defend, until death parts you from this world?" "I do." His voice was a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very stones. "Then by the authority granted by pack law and Moon's blessing, I declare this claiming sanctioned." Moira stepped back. "Alpha, claim your mate." The hall fell silent. Theron turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face. "This will hurt," he said softly, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. "For just a moment. The claiming bite is deep. It has to be, to leave a permanent mark. But I promise you, the pain won't last." Kira nodded, her throat too tight for words. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to adjust, to accept. His lips brushed her temple, her cheek, the corner of her mouth, gentle touches that made her heart race. Then he moved lower, his mouth trailing along her jaw to the curve of her neck. His breath was hot against her skin. She felt the scrape of teeth, the promise of what was coming. Through the bond, his desire crashed over her in waves. Not just physical need, but a soul-deep hunger for completion that had been tearing him apart for months. "Mine," he growled against her throat. His teeth sank in. The pain was bright and sharp, a searing heat that made her gasp. But before she could even process it, the bond exploded. It wasn't the gentle hum she'd grown accustomed to. It was a supernova, a tidal wave, a force so overwhelming it shorted out every other sensation. She felt him, not as a distant presence, but as if he existed inside her own skin. His emotions were hers. His heartbeat synchronized with hers. His soul wove itself into hers until she couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. And the pleasure. Oh God, the pleasure. It started at the bite site and radiated outward in waves that made her legs buckle. Theron's arms banded around her, holding her upright as he held the bite, his tongue laving the wound to speed healing and seal the bond permanently. Kira heard herself make a sound. Not quite a moan, not quite a sob, as sensation overwhelmed her. It was too much, too intense, bordering on pain in its extremity. Then Theron released the bite, and she felt the mark settle into place. A permanent brand on her throat, visible to every wolf who looked at her. A declaration that she was claimed, protected, owned. The word should have made her angry. Instead, it made her feel safe. Theron pulled back just enough to look at her, his lips stained with her blood. His eyes had gone pure wolf, bronze bleeding into gold, pupils dilated with need. "Kira," he rasped, and her name sounded like a prayer. She reached up with trembling fingers to touch his face. Through the bond, now complete, now permanent, she felt everything. The desperate love, the fierce protectiveness, the need to get her somewhere private right now before he lost what remained of his control. "The claiming is witnessed," Elder Moira announced, her voice seeming to come from very far away. "The bond is sealed. Kira of Ashwood is now Kira of Iron Peak, fated mate to the Alpha, Lady of the Northern Reaches. I'll honor her as such." The wolves in the hall knelt as one, acknowledging her new position. Even the ones who'd followed Kieran lowered themselves, though their expressions remained hostile. Kira barely noticed. The bond was singing, thrumming with completion and desire, and the overwhelming need for more. Theron swept her into his arms, cradling her against his chest. "We're done here," he announced to the assembled wolves. His voice brooked no argument. "My mate and I are retiring to private chambers. We are not to be disturbed. Commander, you have authority until morning." He didn't wait for acknowledgement. He simply carried her from the hall, moving through corridors with single-minded purpose. Kira buried her face against his neck, inhaling his scent, stronger now, richer, hers in a way that bypassed all rational thought. She felt his heart hammering against her, felt his wolf straining against his control, demanding its mate, felt his very human fear that he'd move too fast, be too rough, hurt her despite every intention to be gentle. "I trust you," she whispered against his skin. A shudder ran through his entire frame. They reached his chambers, not hers, his. The Alpha's personal rooms, far larger and more austere than her tower. A massive bed dominated one wall, furs and blankets piled thick. A fireplace burned low, casting dancing shadows. Windows overlooked the mountains, and through them, the full moon blazed silver and perfect. Theron set her on her feet beside the bed. His hands shook as they came up to her shoulders, sliding the silk gown down. It pooled at her feet, leaving her bare in the firelight. His breath caught. Through the bond, she felt his reaction. Awe, hunger, reverence. She was beautiful to him. Perfect. His. "Theron," she said, and his name was permission and plea all at once. He shed his own clothes with efficiency that spoke of desperation. Then he was there, skin against skin, heat and solid muscle, and the overwhelming rightness of it. He laid her on the bed with a gentleness that contradicted his size, his strength. His weight settled over her, careful not to crush, and his mouth found hers. The kiss was nothing like the chaste touches before. This was claiming, consuming, a promise of possession that the bond amplified until she couldn't breathe. His tongue swept into her mouth, tasting her, learning her, and she met him with a hunger that surprised them both. His hands mapped her body, slow, thorough, worshipful. Every touch sent sparks of sensation through the bond. feedback looping between them until neither could tell who was feeling what. When his fingers found the apex of her thighs, she arched into him with a gasp. "So ready for me," he murmured against her lips. "So perfect." He prepared her carefully, thoroughly, his fingers working her with a skill that spoke of absolute focus on her pleasure. The bond carried every sensation back to him. He felt what she felt, knew exactly what made her gasp and tremble. When she was trembling on the edge, incoherent with need, he positioned himself above her. His bronze eyes, burning gold now with wolf, locked on hers. "This seals it," he said, his voice gravelly. "There's no going back after this." "I don't want to go back," Kira breathed. And she meant it. He entered her slowly, so slowly, giving her time to adjust to his size. There was discomfort, a stretching fullness that bordered on pain. But the bond softened it, transformed it into something else. A sense of completion so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Theron stilled once he was fully seated, trembling with the effort of control. "Kira," he groaned. "You feel, God, you feel." She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him deeper. "Move." He moved. The rhythm started slow, careful, each thrust measured and controlled. But the bond wouldn't allow restraint. Every sensation she felt echoed back to him amplified. Every spike of pleasure he experienced crashed into her doubled. The feedback loop built and built until control became impossible. His thrusts grew harder, faster, driven by instinct and the wolf's demand to claim its mate thoroughly. Kira met him thrust for thrust, her nails raking down his back, her body moving on instincts she'd never known she possessed. The pleasure built like a storm, gathering, intensifying, becoming almost unbearable in its extremity. Through the bond, she felt him reaching the same edge, felt his control fracturing. "Theron," she gasped. "I can't, it's too much." "Let go," he commanded, his voice barely human. "Let go and trust me." His hand slid between them, finding that sensitive bundle of nerves, and the world shattered. The climax hit her like lightning, white-hot, all-consuming, obliterating every thought. She heard herself cry out, heard him roar in answer as he followed her over the edge. The bond amplified everything, carrying their shared pleasure to heights that seemed to transcend the physical. For a moment, one perfect, eternal moment, they were one being, one soul, one heart beating in two chests. Theron collapsed beside her, immediately pulling her into his arms. They lay tangled together, both trembling, both struggling to breathe. The bond settled into a warm, satisfied hum, complete, permanent, unbreakable. "Mine," Theron murmured into her hair, the word a reverent benediction. "Yours," Kira agreed. And then, because the bond made it true, "And you're mine." His arms tightened around her. "Always." They lay in silence for a long time, the only sounds their gradually slowing breaths and the crackle of the fire. The moon shone through the windows, bathing them in silver light. Kira's hand drifted to the mark on her throat, tender but already healing with supernatural speed. The permanent brand of Theron's claim. Evidence to every wolf who saw her that she was protected, owned, cherished. "No regrets?" Theron asked quietly. She considered the question honestly. Her family was gone. Her old life was over. She'd been stolen and claimed and bound to a male she'd known less than a week. But through the bond she felt his soul, strong and lonely and fiercely devoted. She felt the rightness of being beside him, the completion that came from finally finding the missing piece she'd been searching for her whole life without knowing it. "No regrets," she said. "Not about this." He rolled to face her, his bronze eyes soft in the moonlight. "I will spend every day making sure you never do." He kissed her again, slower this time, gentler, a promise rather than a claiming. And as the moon reached its apex and began its descent, they lay tangled together, two souls finally complete. The bond was sealed. The claiming was done. And tomorrow, the real work would begin. Ruling a fractured pack, facing enemies like Kieran, building a life from the ashes of the one she'd lost. But tonight, wrapped in Theron's arms with the bond singing between them, Kira let herself simply be. Be complete. Be protected. Be home. Chapter 7. Dawn broke over the mountains in shades of rose and gold, light streaming through the windows to paint Theron's chambers in warm colors. Kira woke slowly, wrapped in warmth and the scent of pine and winter air. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. Then she felt the bond, steady and complete, thrumming with contentment, and everything came flooding back. The claiming, The ceremony. The night that had changed everything. She was curled against Theron's side, his arm draped possessively over her waist even in sleep. His face, usually so harsh and controlled, was peaceful in the early light. Younger somehow, the weight of leadership temporarily lifted. Through the bond, she felt his dreams. Running through snow-covered forests, hunting beside a smaller wolf with her coloring, the pure joy of finally having his mate at his side. The dream echo of what they'd done last night made heat flood her cheeks. Her movement must have disturbed him because his eyes opened, bronze and warm, and immediately focusing on her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Good morning," he rumbled, his voice rough with sleep. "Good morning." Her hand drifted to the mark on her throat. Tender but healed, a permanent brand visible to anyone who looked. The physical proof that she was his. Theron's eyes tracked the movement, and something possessive and satisfied flashed through the bond. His hand came up to trace the mark with gentle fingers. "How do you feel?" "Different," Kira admitted. "The bond is so much stronger now. I can feel everything. Where you are, what you're feeling. It's like you're inside my head. And does that frighten you?" She considered. "It should, but it doesn't. It feels." She searched for the word. "Right." Relief and love crashed through the bond. Theron pulled her closer, his lips finding her forehead. "We should stay here forever. Forget the pack, forget politics, just exist in this moment. That would be nice." Kira's fingers traced idle patterns on his chest. "But we both know that's not possible." "No." His jaw tightened. "The council will want to see you this morning. To confirm the claiming, to formally acknowledge you as lady. And Kieran." The name brought tension flooding through the bond. "Kieran will need to be dealt with." As if summoned by his name, a sharp knock sounded at the door. "My lord." The commander's voice, tense with urgency. "I apologize for the interruption, but there's a situation that requires your immediate attention." Theron's eyes closed briefly, frustration rippling through the bond. Then he called out, "Enter." The commander stepped in, his gaze carefully averted from the bed where they lay tangled in furs. "My lord, Lord Kieran has called for a formal challenge. He's assembled his supporters in the Great Hall and is demanding an audience." Kira felt Theron's anger spike, felt the wolf rising to the surface with a snarl. He couldn't even wait one morning. "I'm sorry, my lord." He's claiming the claiming was forced, that Lady Kira was coerced, and that the bond is therefore illegitimate. "That's insane," Kira said, sitting up and pulling the furs to cover herself. I agreed. Everyone witnessed it. "Logic isn't the point," the commander said grimly. "He's using this to rally those who oppose your union. If you don't address this now, it could split the pack." Theron was already moving, extracting himself from the bed with fluid grace despite the tension coiling through him. "Tell him I'll be there within the hour. And commander, triple the guard on these chambers. No one gets to Kira without going through a wall of steel first." "Already done, my lord." The commander bowed and retreated. Theron turned to Kira, and she saw the Alpha in full force now. Crown or no crown, he radiated absolute authority. "Stay here. Lock the door after I leave. Don't open it for anyone except Helena or Mara, and only if they're accompanied by guards you recognize. I'm coming with you." Kira was already sliding from the bed, looking for her discarded gown. "Absolutely not." Theron's voice was iron. "Kieran is dangerous, and if this turns violent, then I need to be there." She found the white silk and pulled it on, ignoring how wrinkled it was. "I'm not hiding in a tower while your brother questions the legitimacy of our bond. That makes me look weak, makes us look weak." "Kira." She crossed to him, placing her hands on his chest. Through the bond, she pushed calm, determination, certainty. "I'm your mate now, your partner. That means standing beside you, especially when it's difficult, especially when someone challenges us." She felt his internal struggle, the instinct to protect warring with respect for her courage. Finally, he nodded. "Together, then. But you stay close to me. If this turns into a fight, I'll get out of the way." She met his eyes. "I'm not a warrior, Theron. I know my limitations. But I am the lady of this pack, and I won't let anyone claim otherwise." Pride surged through the bond, so fierce it made her chest ache. Theron cupped her face and kissed her, deep and possessive and full of promise. "You are magnificent," he murmured against her lips. "Have I mentioned that?" "Not since last night." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. Then the Alpha returned. "Get dressed. Something formal. If we're doing this, we're doing it properly." 20 minutes later, Kira stood before the bronze mirror in borrowed formal attire, a gown of deep midnight blue that Helena had produced from some mysterious storage. It fit perfectly, flowing around her like water, the neckline designed to showcase the claiming mark on her throat. She looked like a queen. The thought should have felt ridiculous. Instead, it felt inevitable. Theron entered wearing his full ceremonial armor and crown. Together, they made a striking pair: power and grace, strength and wisdom, Alpha and his claimed mate. The walk to the Great Hall felt like marching to war. Guards flanked them on all sides, a moving wall of protection. Wolves lined the corridors, watching with expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Word of Kieran's challenge had spread fast. The Great Hall was packed. Hundreds of wolves crowded the space, filling every available inch. The pack's division was painfully obvious. Theron's supporters clustered on one side, Kieran's on the other, with a nervous, undecided middle ground between them. Kieran stood on the raised platform, surrounded by his core supporters. He'd dressed for combat, practical armor, weapons at his sides. His gray eyes burned with cold fury when they landed on Kira. "Brother," he called out as Theron and Kira entered. "How gracious of you to finally join us. I trust we didn't interrupt anything important." The innuendo was clear. Several of Kieran's supporters snickered. Theron's hand tightened on Kira's, but his voice remained level as they moved through the crowd. "You called for this audience, Kieran. State your grievance." "My grievance?" Kieran's voice rose, carrying to every corner. "My grievance is that you've bound yourself to a weakness, that you've let lust and obsession cloud your judgment, that you've taken a Delta from nowhere and elevated her above wolves who've served this pack for generations." The Bond chose. "The bond is a convenient excuse," Kieran interrupted. "You expect us to believe that the moon goddess herself ordained this match? That it's pure coincidence the bond appeared just when pressure to take a strategic mate was highest?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Kira felt doubt spreading like poison. "I felt the bond weeks before any discussions of political matches," Theron said, his voice dangerous quiet. "The pull nearly drove me mad. The pack witnessed my deterioration. Or witnessed an alpha afraid to do his duty." Kieran began to pace, working the crowd like a performer. "Think about it. A fated mate bond means you can ignore all political considerations. No need to ally with the Eastern packs through marriage. No need to strengthen ties with the coastal territories. No need to do what's best for this pack because you've found your precious destined love." He turned to face the crowd fully. "But I ask you, where is the proof? A bond can be faked. Emotions can be manufactured. And a frightened Delta from a nothing pack could easily be convinced to play along, especially when the alternative is death." "That's not what happened," Kira said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Every eye turned to her. "I didn't fake anything. I didn't want this bond. I fought it every step of the way." "Exactly." Kieran pointed at her triumphantly. "She admits it. She didn't want the bond. So how do we know the claiming wasn't forced? How do we know she wasn't coerced through threat or manipulation into accepting? Because I'm standing here telling you I chose this." Kira stepped forward, pulling away from Theron's protective grip. The guards tensed, but she kept moving until she stood at the base of the platform, looking up at Kieran. "I chose to accept the bond. I chose the claiming. Not because I was threatened, but because I recognized the truth, that Theron is my fated match and fighting it would destroy us both." "Pretty words," Kieran sneered. "Rehearsed, no doubt. Then let me give you unrehearsed truth." Kira's voice strengthened. "I hate that I was taken from my family. I hate that they think I'm dead. I hate that I didn't get a choice in when or how this bond manifested. But the bond itself," she touched the mark on her throat. "This is real. The connection between us is real. And anyone with eyes can see it." She turned to address the crowd. "I didn't ask to be Lady of Iron Peak. I didn't grow up dreaming of power or position. But the moon goddess chose me for this, chose me for him. And I can either accept that gift or spend my life fighting against my own nature." Her eyes found Kieran again. "I'm not a weakness. I'm a Delta, a wolf designed to strengthen pack bonds, to mediate conflicts, to bring balance. And this pack needs that desperately because from where I stand, it's tearing itself apart." Silence filled the hall. Kira could feel the crowd's uncertainty, their wavering allegiance. Kieran's face darkened. "You speak well for a prisoner." "I'm not a prisoner." Kira climbed the steps to the platform, ignoring the gasps from the crowd. She stood tall, meeting Kieran's glare without flinching. "I'm the Alpha's mate. I'm your lady. And I'm done letting you treat me like a weakness to be exploited. Then prove it. Kieran moved closer, invading her space. Prove you're not some frightened Delta playing a role. Prove you have the strength to stand as lady of this pack. Through the bond, Kira felt Theron's alarm, his instinct to intervene. But she sent back calm certainty. This was her battle to fight. How would you have me prove it? She asked quietly. Kieran's smile was cold. Submit to a challenge. Pack law allows any wolf to challenge the alpha's mate if they believe the bond is false or the mate is unworthy. Submit to judgment by the pack itself. The crowd erupted in shouts, some approving, others protesting. Elder Moira stepped forward, her face grave. Lord Kieran, such challenges are rare and dangerous. The customs exist for exactly this situation, Kieran interrupted. When a mate's worthiness is in question, the pack has the right to test them, to see if they possess the strength, the courage, the cunning required to stand beside an alpha. He turned back to Kira. So what will it be, little Delta? Will you accept the challenge? Or will you hide behind your mate's protection and prove me right? Kira felt Theron moving through the crowd, felt his desperate need to reach her, to stop this. But she also felt something else through the bond, his belief in her. His certainty that she was strong enough, brave enough, worthy enough. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't raised for politics or power plays. But she was a Delta, and Deltas understood pack dynamics better than anyone. I accept, she said clearly. Name your challenge. Kieran's eyes gleamed with triumph. 3 tests. First, strength of will. You must stand in the center of the hall, while every wolf present releases their dominance. If you remain standing under the weight of our combined alpha pressure, you pass. If you fall, you fail. Kira's stomach dropped. The combined dominance of hundreds of wolves, many of them alphas and betas? It would be crushing, overwhelming. But she nodded. Agreed. What's the second test? Wisdom. Kieran gestured to the assembled crowd. You will be presented with a pack dispute. Real grievances between wolves with legitimate competing interests. You must render judgment that satisfies pack law and maintains peace. Fail to do so, and you prove yourself incapable of the role. And the third? Kieran's smile turned vicious. Loyalty. You will choose your old pack or your new one, your birth family or your mate. Prove where your true allegiance lies. The crowd held its collective breath. These weren't just tests. They were designed to break her, to force her into impossible choices. Theron had reached the platform, his face a mask of fury. This is ridiculous. No. Kira placed a hand on his arm, stopping him. Through the bond, she sent love, trust, determination. If this is what it takes to prove myself to the pack, then I'll do it. All 3 tests. Kira. Trust me, she whispered. Then louder to Kieran. I accept all 3 challenges. When do we begin? Now. Kieran moved to the edge of the platform. Everyone, take positions around the hall. Form a circle with Lady Kira at the center. The wolves moved, creating a ring around the platform with Kira at its heart. She descended the steps on shaking legs, forcing herself to move to the exact center. Hundreds of eyes watched her, judging, calculating. Theron stood at the edge of the circle, his hands clenched into fists. Through the bond, his fear for her was a living thing, but also his pride. His certainty that she would succeed. Begin, Kieran commanded. The dominance hit her. It came from all directions. The crushing weight of alpha wolves asserting their authority, beta wolves adding their strength, even the lowest-ranked wolves contributing what power they had. It pressed down on her shoulders, her chest, her very soul. Her omega nature screamed at her to submit, to lower her eyes, to kneel. Kira locked her knees and focused on the bond. On Theron's presence, steady and solid as the mountains themselves. On the claiming mark that declared her his equal, his partner. On the fact that she wasn't just an omega anymore. She was the alpha's mate, and that carried authority of its own. She didn't fight the pressure. Instead, she absorbed it, let it flow around her like water around stone. This wasn't about being stronger than them. It was about being immovable in her conviction. Seconds stretched into minutes. Her legs trembled. Sweat beaded on her forehead. But she didn't fall. Finally, Kieran called, "Enough." The pressure released. Kira swayed but remained upright. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. First test passed, Elder Moira announced. Strength of will is proven. Kieran's jaw tightened. He'd expected her to fail. The second test. Bring forth the petitioners. 2 wolves stepped forward. one an older male with grizzled fur and work-worn hands, the other a younger female with hard eyes. The commander stepped up to explain. Garrett claims the spring hunting grounds by right of traditional territory. His family has used those lands for 3 generations. Sylvie claims them by right of current need. Her family is larger and requires more resources. He looked at Kira. Both claims are legitimate under pack law. You must choose. It was designed to be impossible, a zero-sum choice where someone would be hurt. But Kira was a Delta. She didn't see conflicts as battles to be won. She saw them as problems to be solved. When were these hunting grounds last shared? She asked. Garrett frowned. My grandfather's time, perhaps. But the game is scarce. Then we make it abundant. Kira looked between them. Garrett, your family has knowledge of these lands spanning generations. Sylvie, your family has greater need and greater numbers. Garrett will maintain primary claim to the grounds, but Sylvie's family will work them in partnership. Garrett shares his knowledge of the best hunting patterns. Sylvie shares her family's labor in maintaining the territory. The game is managed properly, both families eat, and the grounds benefit from having more wolves invested in their protection. Silence. Then Garrett slowly nodded. That could work. Sylvie looked reluctant but calculating. My family would agree to those terms. Second test passed, Moira said, and this time there was approval in her voice. Wisdom is proven. Kieran's face had gone dark with rage. The final test. He gestured, and 2 wolves dragged forward a figure, bound, gagged, terrified. Kira's world stopped. It was Finn, her little brother. Alive. We found him in the neutral zone, Kieran said coldly. Trying to cross into our territory. Looking for his dead sister, apparently. His eyes burned into Kira. Here's your choice, Lady Kira. Your brother lives if you renounce Theron and return to Ashwood. Or he dies, and you remain here as mate to the Alpha who orchestrated your family's suffering. The hall erupted in chaos. Theron roared and lunged toward Kieran, but Kieran's guards, blocked his path. Through the bond, Kira felt his absolute fury, his horror at this violation of every code. Finn's eyes found hers, wide, confused, terrified. He was 10 years old. Just a pup, and Kieran had just made him a pawn in a power play. Kira walked toward her brother with careful, measured steps. She knelt before him, gently removing the gag despite the guards' protests. Kira, Finn's voice cracked. They said you were dead. They said. I'm alive. She pulled him into her arms, feeling his thin frame shake with sobs. I'm alive, and I'm so sorry you've been dragged into this. She looked up at Kieran, and for the first time since arriving in Iron Peak, she let her Delta nature show in full force. Not as weakness, but as power. Her voice carried through the hall, calm and absolute. You've made a mistake, Kieran. Have I? He smirked. Choose then. Your brother or your mate. I choose both. Kira stood, pulling Finn behind her protectively. Because that's not a choice any alpha worthy of the title would force. You claim Theron is weak. You claim I make him vulnerable. She laughed, the sound cold as winter. You've just shown this entire pack exactly who the real weakness is. A wolf who would threaten a pup from outside our territory who poses no danger, to score political points. A wolf who would violate every sacred law of pack conduct because he's desperate to discredit his brother. She turned to address the crowd. I am Delta. That means I feel the pack's emotional currents better than anyone in this room. And I feel your revulsion right now. Your horror at what Kieran has done. Because using a child as leverage? That's not strength. That's cowardice. The crowd's murmur grew louder. Angry now, but directed at Kieran. Even some of his own supporters looked uncertain. Theron gave me a choice, Kira continued. He took me from my home, yes. He staged my death. But when it came to the claiming, he let me choose. He gave me conditions. He respected my voice even when he didn't have to. She looked at Kieran. You just proved you're everything he's not. A wolf who uses force instead of respect. Who sees others as tools rather than people. Who values power over honor. She moved to stand before Kieran, Finn clutching her hand. I don't renounce Theron. I don't choose my old pack over my new one. Because that's a false choice designed by a false challenger. Instead, I choose to be Lady of Iron Peak and to use my authority to protect those who can't protect themselves. Including my brother, who will be granted sanctuary in these lands under my protection. You don't have that authority, Kieran snarled. She does. Theron's voice rang out. He'd fought through the guards and now stood at Kira's side, his hand finding hers. As my mate, her word is law second only to mine. If she grants sanctuary, then sanctuary is granted. This is insane. No. Elder Moira stepped forward, and with her, the commander and several other high-ranking wolves. This is justice. Lord Kieran, you have violated pack law by threatening a pup. You have shown cowardice masked as strength. And you have proven beyond doubt that Lady Kira possesses the wisdom, the courage, and the heart required to stand beside our Alpha. She turned to the crowd. All in favor of recognizing Kira of Iron Peak as our rightful lady, make it known. The response was overwhelming. Not just Theron's supporters, but wolves from the middle ground, and even some of Kieran's former allies. Hands raised, voices called out affirmation. Kieran stood alone, his face twisted with fury. This isn't over, he spat. Yes, Theron said quietly. It is. You are stripped of your rank. You are banished from Iron Peak territory. You have until sunset to leave, or you will be dealt with according to pack law for threatening the Alpha's mate. Kieran looked around at faces that had turned from supportive to condemning. Then, without another word, he turned and strode from the hall, a handful of diehard supporters following. The hall erupted in cheers. Kira stood in the center of it all, her brother clutching her hand, her mate at her side, and felt something settle deep in her chest. Not resignation, not acceptance of defeat, but homecoming. She was Lady of Iron Peak, mate to the Alpha, protector of the pack, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. Epilogue 1 month later. Kira stood at the window of her tower, no longer a prison, but truly her sanctuary, watching the sun set over the mountains. Finn was in the courtyard below, playing with the pups from the pack families, his laughter carrying on the evening breeze. She'd sent word to her parents through secure channels. They knew she lived. They knew she was safe. And they knew that Finn was with her, protected and whole. It wasn't perfect, she couldn't see them, couldn't return home. But it was something, a thread of connection that made the loss bearable. Arms wrapped around her from behind, and she leaned back into Theron's solid warmth. The bond hummed contentedly between them, no longer a source of conflict, but of strength. He's happy here, Theron murmured, his chin resting on her head. Your brother. He fits in well with the pack pups. He does. Kira smiled. Thank you for letting him stay. You're my mate. Your family is my family. Theron turned her in his arms, his bronze eyes soft in the fading light. Are you happy? Kira considered the question honestly. A month ago, she would have said no without hesitation. But now, having seen what they could build together, having felt the pack slowly accepting her, having watched Finn heal from his trauma. Yes, she said. I'm happy. Not in the way I imagined my life would go, but happy nonetheless. Good. Theron kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. Because you've transformed this pack, Kira. You've healed divisions I thought were permanent. You've brought wisdom and compassion to a place that only knew strength. You've made me a better Alpha. We make each other better, Kira corrected. That's what fated mates do. Outside, the full moon began to rise, silver and perfect, and calling to every wolf in the territory. Through the bond, Kira felt Theron's wolf stir, felt her own answer in kind. Run with me tonight? Theron asked, his voice roughening with the change. Under the moon, through the mountains, as wolves should? Kira's answer was to shift, bones realigning, for sprouting, the world sharpening into the heightened senses of her wolf form. Beside her, Theron transformed into his massive dark wolf, bronze eyes glowing in the twilight. They ran together from the tower, through corridors now familiar, out into the night where pack members howled greeting to their Alpha and Lady. And as they raced into the forest, side by side, Kira finally understood what the bond had been trying to tell her all along. She wasn't trapped. She was home. The end.